Hello and welcome to the Doug Geiser Show, Year 2, brought to you by the Ashland University Journalism and Digital Media Department. I'm Ethan Jenkins, and I'm joined by Doug Geiser, the head coach of the Ashland University football team. Coach, another week. Thanks for coming back on.
I appreciate you guys having me.
This past weekend, the team suffered a tough loss against Walsh, 24-10. What were some of your main takeaways from that game this weekend?
First thing I would do is I would commend Walsh. They did a tremendous job, and they got the win at the end. They made more plays than us at the end of the game, and that's the name of it. You got to have more points at the end of the game, and their offense outscored our offense. And in this day and age in college football, you need more than 10 points. That's real. And then defensively, you got to tackle better. You got to play the ball in the air a little bit better. You got to tackle better. I thought special teams were pretty much a wash on both sides. So, those factors right there led to them getting a big win.
You mentioned those 10 points on offense. What has to change going forward to make sure that you guys can execute better?
The biggest thing is self-inflicted wounds. We had a number of explosive plays were negated by penalties, and so good football teams can't do that. Also, you look at it, we got to throw the ball and catch the ball a little bit better as well. They had very positive coverage throughout the game in the secondary, and there comes a time in every single game where you got to run it, and they know you're going to run it. You still need to be able to, execute. The same goes to the pass game too. There comes a point where you got to pass it, they know you got to pass it. Can you hold up protection? Can you complete the throw and the catch? And we didn't do enough of that on the offensive side of the ball, and that's got to change going forward.
And even though that many stats may not have jumped right off the sheet, who were some impressive players you saw this week from the Eagles side?
I would say on the defensive side of the ball, Mike Shimmick had a tremendous game, and that just added to the number of games this year. He's played very impressively. For him, it was kind of coming home. He literally lives about 5 minutes away from Walsh's campus, so he's in front of a lot of friends and family that might not be able to get a chance to see him play normally, and he showed out. He showed out, and he showed why he's one of the best defensive linemen in the league.
And obviously with a loss this late in the season, what does that teach your team?
Hey, you got to be able to show up every single week, and you got to be able to play. You got to make sure, preparation-wise, you've done what you need to do there. You got to execute when the time comes, and you better bring the fire too. And we didn't match that, and it was to our detriment.
And obviously this loss pushes you guys out of the playoff picture. So what's kind of that next goal that you're looking to aim for and looking to achieve next?
Well, the next goal is still there. We put ourselves in a position where, if we're successful this weekend, we get a share of the GMAC championship. It could be by ourselves, depending on the outcome of some other games. So there's still a whole lot to play for at this point. It's a credit to what the team has done up to this point. So there's nothing that keeps you from winning the conference at this point. And you said, playoffs being, ended. That's not necessarily true either at this point. It's out of our hands, but nothing happens if we don't win a game. So we've got to go into this game against a tough Kentucky Wesleyan team who is looking to rebound and make their season. And so, we got to go into it like we do every single week and prepare and get ready to shoot our best shot.
And what are kind of the main differences from this past weekend against Walsh to this weekend against Kentucky Wesleyan that just needs to be flipped in just a matter of days?
Well, you look at some of the corrections we had to make yesterday, on Sundays when we watched the tape. The biggest thing is, play the ball in the air. And if there is a completion, you got to make the tackle. That's real. That's real. I thought the run defense was good most of the game, so we're pretty solid there. On the offensive side of the ball, showing a little more discipline so you don't have self-inflicted wounds like penalties, holding penalties, an illegal chop penalty. I don't think there were any procedure calls, but those there need to be tightened up. They literally negated 5 or 6 plays that would have been explosive plays, keeping drives going. And like I said, you can't do that against a good football team. So yeah, that's probably the biggest thing, and we have to do a little more efficient job of, in our pass game, throwing and catching the ball.
And you mentioned you have a chance to get the share of that GMAC title again, or with Findlay. So how important is it to kind of, even if you might not get up to there, keep your program's name up there with the best teams in the GMAC? Well,
our goal every single year, one of our first goals is to win the conference. And so as I told the team after the game, and then also on yesterday, I said, if I would have told you last December when we had that first team meeting for this season that you'd go into week 11, have a chance to win the conference championship by your own hands, you would have taken that. If I'd have mentioned it in the spring, same thing. If I'd have mentioned that in training camp, you said, hey, I'm on board. And that's still there. That goal is still there for us to achieve. And that's the only goal that matters at this point, going forward there. That, and with this week also being senior week, I've challenged you underclassmen to play for the seniors, give your best effort for the seniors who have left quite a legacy. You know, in their 4 years here, they're 31-13, 70% win percentage, and what a greater way to honor them than to go out and play the game of the year so far in their honor to hopefully lead us to a big victory.
Well, Coach, thanks for joining me here for this opening segment.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
It is now time for us to take a quick break and join you all back here shortly. Stay tuned through this commercial break. You're watching the Doug Geiser Show right here on AUTV. Welcome back to the Doug Geiser Show. I'm currently joined by a rock on the defense, Christian Garish. Christian, thanks so much for hopping on the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So to jump straight into things, the defensive line has been one of the main components of the defense. How have you guys improved over the course of this season?
The defensive line, we got a good group of veteran leaders there with Colin Strong, myself, Mason Graney. We've had a lot of experience. And then we got a good group of young guys that are coming in, just really athletic, strong, fast. So it's been a great privilege to play with them and have fun.
And so not only the players, your coaching staff helps you out a lot too. Who have been the coaches that have really led those veterans to be so complete now, late in the stages of their career?
I mean, obviously I got to go with Coach Sock. I mean, he's been there forever. So it's one of those where, like, he's seen everything and he's made sure to keep us, like, prepared, let us know, like, we know, hey, this is what we're looking at this week, changing things up if we have to, and then going from there.
And for Coach Geiser, how has it been kind of reassuring for you to know that you're always going to have that solid defense to almost bail your offense out if they're not playing well that day?
It can bail the offense and the special teams out, really. It's a source of strength. It allows me to sleep a little bit at night, knowing that you can always count on this portion of it, especially the defensive line. I knew, you know, from last season and into spring practice, they were a dominant force on the team. So okay, we can hang our hat on that, and we can make sure things are going right there, so we, you know, maybe put more attention or focus on somewhere else to help bring them up to speed.
And then for Christian, back in the locker room, how is the chemistry between the defensive line and who are kind of the leaders that have rose through the ranks for you guys?
I mean, we always, every time we break, we always say brotherhood. I mean, that's what it is. At the end of the day, we know we're one unit. We're all together. If we have questions, we sit there and we talk to one another. Leader-wise, I mean, Colin Strong, he's been a leader since day one. He's not necessarily the most talkative, but when it needs to be said, he'll say it. I myself have been put in a leadership role, and I've been trying my best to, take up that notch from guys from like Nick Cohn, Dawson, Riley, and guys before me. So it's been a lot of fun, and keep it going.
And then obviously the defensive line overall is a part of the defense. Who are some of the other players on the defense that have really stepped out and played well behind you guys?
Oh man, I mean, can't forget about Ben Holzhoffel. I mean, that kid, he's true sophomore, playing lights out. I mean, sadly got hurt this past week, but he's a great player. He's one that, you sit there and it's like, okay, maybe if I don't get there or Colin doesn't get there or some of the other defensive ends, he's going to make a play. And then speaking of defensive ends, Mike Shimmick. I mean, the dude's playing amazing. It's fun to play with him.
And taking a look at this past weekend against Walsh, obviously a tough loss for you guys. What were some of your team's takeaways from that loss?
Just assignments. Sometimes we were like, we'd get moved out of the way a little bit too much, or we'd give up too much here and there. Tackling, we just got to make sure we're a lot more sure tackled when we actually make contact with them. So I think that's really the biggest thing, is just, making sure we're all on the same page. And physicality, that's what, our defense prides itself on being physical, and I don't think necessarily we were there last week. So it's just one thing that we got to make sure we bring it against Kentucky Wesleyan.
And speaking of Kentucky Wesleyan, what are some of the keys for you guys specifically against that team this week?
They're a very athletic team. A lot of people sleep on them, but I mean, you can't sit there and look past the team, because every team's dangerous in their own right. They got one of the best running backs in the league, so that's going to be something that, as an interior group, we take pride in trying to shut them down. So that's going to be our goal this week.
Then obviously one final game this year at Jack Miller Stadium, senior day as well. Just describe the atmosphere that the fans bring.
Atmosphere is great. I mean, especially as defense. Offense, they like to keep it a little bit more quiet so they can, get the plays in and stuff. But defense, we like it loud, and so that's what, when we play at home, it's probably the loudest stadium we play at. So it's like, when everyone's there, everyone's cheering us on, and we get in that third down long situation, it causes chaos for the opposing offense and makes us play a lot better.
Well, Christian, thanks so much for joining me here today.
Thanks for having me.
When we return back from this next commercial break, we will be joined by Ethan Enders. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned right here on the Doug Geiser Show on AUTV. Welcome back to the Doug Geiser Show. I'm currently joined by standout offensive lineman Ethan Enders. Ethan squared here today. Thanks for coming on to the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us.
So to jump right into things, Coach Geiser has praised the offensive line, how you guys have really been able to mesh together even with young faces this season. What type of work went in the offseason to make sure that you guys were good to go for this year?
Yeah, off-season work really starts in the weight room. Try to lift as a unit together and do a lot of things as a unit. Is basically what helps us mesh so well in the season. And spring ball is the key. I was out this spring, but getting the young guys in and getting them play time in the spring helps a lot when we get to the fall.
And then for Coach Geiser, moving really into conference play is when this offensive line really started to come together. Did you expect that to happen so quickly, even though you had a lot of tough opponents early?
It's with developing the offensive line, it's just a matter of reps. That's all it is. And the thing that Ethan didn't mention was this: he was out in the spring too, but so was Justin Henry, and then Nico Tracek was finishing high school. So I knew just having a short camp this year, 2 weeks, it was going to be some weeks into the season before we'd start to see the fruits of that labor. So they did a great job of accelerating it through camp in those 2 weeks, but still, I knew it was going to take a number of games before it all started hitting on all cylinders.
And Ethan, when looking at your guys' relationship as an offensive line, what is that communication like when the other teams are showing pressure? How does that all work?
Yeah, it really something Coach Geiser says is it's all five guys looking through one set of eyes. And that starts with our preparation throughout the week when we watch film as a unit, making sure that we're all seeing the same thing when we're looking at something. And then it's all to communication on the field, each play, making sure we know who we're working to, who we want to slide the protection to, working with Trevor on that as well. And communication is a big key, and you can't over-communicate.
And when looking at the growth of the offensive line, you can't have that without the coaches as well. So who have been some of your mentors within the coaching staff?
Yeah, obviously, Coach Geiser, fantastic O-line coach, had him for 2 years before we were joined by Coach Cordell. And we're blessed at Ashland to have two of the best O-line coaches in the nation. With both of them, and they've been two really big helps, I think, to the success that we've had up front.
And notoriously, there's been a lot of award winners across Eagles offensive linemen over the years. So how does that kind of raise the standard and keep that pressure on so you guys have that ability to perform?
Yeah, obviously, the big thing is to win as a team, but it certainly is nice to be awarded individually. And that path was paved well before I got here with some of the greats before us. Like Vince Cashdaller, and then guys when I got here with Eric Pickering and Gavin Posey, Sam Putoff were two big key factors. My first year I started were award winners, and they paved the path, and it's great to try to follow those footsteps.
And so now moving on to present day, you're kind of one of those leaders on the offensive line. What has that experience been like going down towards some of the younger players?
Yeah, it's absolutely a privilege to be a leader on the offensive line and helping guide the young guys, and as they have questions, being able to answer them, or even being able to go back and forth with a guy like Nick Walker. Hey, how would you attack this, or what do you see here? It's definitely an honor to be able to be a guy that people can look up to in the O-line room for guidance.
And then moving forward, how do you hope to continue your career here at AU?
Absolutely to win games and bring home as many wins as we possibly can, and win the GMAC, and overall just win as a team would be the best way to continue my career here.
Well, Ethan, thanks so much for hopping on the show with us here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
When we return back from this next commercial break, we will wrap up the show with Coach Geiser. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. You're watching the Doug Geiser Show right here on AUTV. Welcome back to the Doug Geiser Show right here on AUTV. Coach, it's time for the final segment of today's show, and before we dive into the upcoming schedule and standings as well, we have to talk about the game against Kentucky Wesleyan this weekend. With it being the regular season finale, what are the emotions like with the team?
Well, you try to not play that up as much as possible, just because you can have a tendency of being over excited, and you try to do more than what you actually need to do. So you got to kind of keep those things in check. Will it be tough for the seniors? Yeah, it will, because they're going to be recognized before the game with their parents or guardians, friends, or whatnot, and it's only right to do that. So they're going to have to really play on their maturity and make sure they can control those emotions. So when it becomes game time, just go out there and play like you have the other previous 10 games. And
for the fans out there, who should they be on the lookout for on the Panthers side of things?
On the Panthers side of the ball, if you remember last year, they did a great job with their passing game, and they're very prolific in their passing game. So we've always got to keep an eye on that. They do have one of the best rushers in the league, in Brandon Mackey. So we're going to have to find a way. He's closing in on 1,000 yards. We're going to have to find a way to kind of corral him a little bit. It's kind of really made them more multifaceted and harder to defend. So that's going to be a big key for our defense, going forward. Yes, for our defense. But offensively, they play a 4-2-5, and they always play tight coverage. They always have some of the best corners in the league. So our receivers are going to be challenged this week to be able to get off of man coverage, and that's going to be a big key for us.
All right, Coach, so now we're going to take a look at the schedule over the course of this whole season. So in looking at the schedule, we're obviously approaching the last week. How do you ensure that your guys are locked in for one final game, especially coming off of a loss?
Well, you just challenge the maturity of the team is what you do. And you can probably answer the question for me, but yesterday, the final thing we talk about after corrections and the walkthrough and everything is you tell them, okay, hey, whether it's after a win or a loss, and we haven't had a loss in a while, in 2 months, once you leave the facility on this Sunday, you close the book on Walsh. You don't look back. You don't say what if at this point. You got to put all your attention and all your focus and all your preparation on Kentucky Wesleyan, because they deserve that. They deserve that. Otherwise, you're being very disrespectful to that opponent. So, it's just a process thing for us from week to week to be able to do that. And the guys have done a great job reacting to that throughout the season. So I would, hopefully, count on them and their maturity, and also our leaders to help set the tempo for, during practice tomorrow.
And then also, when you take a look at the standings, there's some teams on your tail right now. So what's the motto for the team as you guys look to maybe get a co-part of that title or get the title itself?
Really, what keeps us, all encompassed, and we only have enough energy to focus on the Eagles at this point. So we don't worry about the things we can't control. We can't control those other teams. They got to do what they got to do. We can't control the officials, the weather, or anything along those lines. Let's focus on the Eagles, get back to doing that one more time. It's been very successful for us during the year in the last 2 years. So hopefully that'll pull us through this week.
Last thing here for you, Coach. Senior Day coming up this Saturday. What does it mean to the program, and how do you hope to send out that class?
You always remember your last game, especially your last home game. I still remember my last home game in high school and in college, and something you always go back to. And so you'd like to be able to have that to be a fond memory and be able to make that a victory if at all possible. So, that's why we challenge our team. Hey, this week is about the seniors. We're not even, the focus isn't even on the conference championship. It's about the seniors. And you do whatever you need to do to prepare to honor them in your preparation, in your practice, and in your play. And if you do those things, I think you'll like the outcome at the end of the day. So you really focus more on that than anything else, just as a thank you to that group that's been here 4 or 5 years for all the efforts they put in and the legacy they're leaving us.
Well, Coach, thanks so much for joining the show here today.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
As a reminder, be sure to tune into 88.9 WRDL for full live game coverage of Ashland University versus the Kentucky Wesleyan Panthers on Saturday, November 16th, with kickoff set for 1 p.m. And if you want to hear more from Coach Geiser, tune into the Early Birds Word Tuesday mornings at 7:30 a.m. for exclusive coverage of AU football. You can also catch the game on tape delay on Rock Entertainment Sports Network, brought to you by the Ashland University Journalism and Digital Media Department. I'm Ethan Jenkins saying thank you so much for tuning into the Doug Geiser Show right here on AUTV.